Chapter 8. Thursday night. Maggie couldn't concentrate on her psych paper. She stared down at her desk without seeing it. All she could see was a sticky, dripping lunch bag, which had turned out to be filled with red paint. Then Shannon's face, then the dripping blood. Then Shannon's face again, the hurt look, the look of complete shock, of betrayal. "I've got to apologize," she said aloud. She couldn't bear to have Shannon so mad at her. She couldn't bear to feel so guilty, so wrong. The car was parked in front of the house, but Meg felt like walking. Walking the 9 or 10 blocks would give her time to think of what she was going to say. It had rained most of the afternoon, and the air still smelled fresh and wet. Small puddles of water on the pavement reflected shimmering yellow light from the street lamps. Meg jumped over the bigger puddles, walking quickly. She reached Shannon's house without deciding exactly what to say. She just wanted to throw herself on Shannon's mercy and beg her forgiveness. Shannon could be cold and hard, she knew, especially this past year. It might take a lot of begging, but what choice did she have? The Harper's house was set back high over a sweeping lawn of carefully trimmed grass, a large, old, weeping willow looming over the driveway like an ancient servant guarding the entranceway. The front of the house was completely dark, but Meg knew that the family always stayed in the family room and kitchen in the back. Shannon opened the door a few seconds after Meg rang the bell. Her face fell. "Oh, it's you?" "I came to grovel at your feet," Meg said, trying unsuccessfully to keep her voice steady. "I just want to apologize. I'll do anything, really. I feel terrible." "That's good," Shannon said, looking past Meg. "You've got to accept my apology," Meg said. "You're my best friend, and—" "Come in," Shannon said, pulling back the door. Her voice was flat and unfriendly. Meg followed her into the entranceway. Shannon was wearing tan Bermuda shorts and a sleeveless white undershirt-type top. Her arms and legs looked very pale, almost ivory pale. Everyone looked really pale in May, Meg decided, after the long winter. Shannon led her into the dark living room, switched on a brass floor lamp, and took a seat on a narrow red velvet antique love seat. Meg hated Shannon's living room, partly because the furniture was so fancy and so uncomfortable, and partly because of the large photograph of Evan that hung in a dark wooden frame in the center of the front wall. It was impossible to stand or sit in the room without staring at the photograph, and it made Meg even more uncomfortable than the hard, ornate chairs. It wasn't at all a typical photo of Evan. For one thing, he was wearing a dark sports jacket and a tie. He had just come from some sort of family function, a wedding maybe. His blonde hair, usually wild and unruly, was slicked back. His eyes were set in a blank stare, and he was wearing a forced smile that Meg had never seen on him in real life. Meg figured this was the way Mr. and Mrs. Harper wanted to remember Evan. Not the way he was, a troublemaker, a wild man, but the way he looked in this picture, civilized and completely in control. Staring at the photograph always brought back memories of the other side of Evan for Meg, though. It was as if her mind were rejecting this false image, this smooth stranger, to bring back the real boy she knew with all his faults and all of his problems. She suddenly remembered a night downstairs in a game room in Shannon's basement. Who was there that night? All of them. Shannon and Ellen and Meg and Tony and Evan. Tony and Evan were shooting pool on a large table in the center of the room. The girls were trying to play doubles ping pong with only 3 people. Meg could hear the sounds in that room again, the shouts, the loud laughter, the pop of the ping pong ball against the paddles, the clicking sound the ball made as the girls chased it across the tile floor, and the solid tap of the pool cues hitting the shiny colored billiard balls. Evan was in a particularly wild mood that night. He had accidentally rammed one of the family's cars into the back of a pickup truck that afternoon, and Tony was laughing at him. "It wasn't my fault, man," Evan declared, knocking the 3 ball into a corner pocket and grinning at Tony, pleased with himself. "You plow into the back of a truck, and it isn't your fault?" Tony scoffed. "No way. That truck was going below the minimum speed on the thruway, so I couldn't help it. He was going too slow." Tony laughed and missed his shot. "So you tried to speed him up by giving him a little bump," Ellen muttered. "A little bump that totaled your car?" Tony fell on the floor laughing, holding his sides. "So you're both against me, huh?" Evan said, staring at Ellen. Suddenly he wasn't joking anymore. "No, Evan. Tony and I—" "I saw you," Evan cried, swatting his pool cue hard against the side of the table. "You think it's a big joke, huh? Some idiot driver slows down and forces me to crash, and you two think it's a riot?" "Hey, come on, man," Tony started, holding up his hands as if to surrender. "No, you come on," Evan cried. He raised his pool cue like a sword and started swinging it against Tony's cue. Click, click, click. Evan, his eyes wild, his blonde hair tossed back, started hitting Tony's cue harder and harder, challenging Tony to fence with him. "Evan, stop!" Ellen cried. He swung his cue like a baseball bat, meaning to hit Tony, but Tony ducked and the cue hit Ellen on the shoulder. It made a loud, sharp sound. She cried out and backed against the basement wall. Evan? But Evan ignored her. He and Tony were standing on the pool table now, going at each other with grim determination, like a movie sword fight. Meg remembered the look on Tony's face. It was all just a goof to him. He was having a great time. But Evan looked serious, intent on winning. It soon became obvious to everyone but Tony that Evan was really fighting. The pool cues clattered against each other. Both boys leaped down from the pool table and moved across the floor, attacking and thrusting. Evan's face grew bright red. He was scowling and his eyes seemed to be clamped shut. Suddenly he swung hard. There was a loud crack. Tony's eyes went wide, then rolled up in his head. He slumped down on the floor. Blood began to pour down his hair from the top of his head. Evan didn't look down at Tony. He was studying his pool cue. I think I cracked it, he said, very concerned. Ellen began to shriek at him. How could you do that to Tony? Meg remembered the surprised look on Evan's face. He didn't seem to realize what he had done. He looked down. His expression changed, his features all seeming to drop at once. He bent over Tony. Hey, you okay? There was an accident. I guess my arm... That's okay, Tony said groggily. He smiled up at his friend. He would always forgive Evan for anything. Meg and Shannon decided to drive Tony to the emergency room at Shadyside Hospital. As they left, they could still hear Ellen down in the basement, yelling at Evan, trying to make him admit that it wasn't an accident. Tony got 5 stitches. It was a horrible night, but no one ever knew what to expect from Evan. Some nights he was a lot of fun, the funniest, happiest guy around. Other nights, his arm slipped. People would get hurt. You keep staring at that photo, Shannon said from the small love seat. Her words brought Meg back to the present. Yeah, I know. It's a weird photo, isn't it? Shannon asked, shaking her head. Evan looks like some kind of Martian. He doesn't look like Evan, Meg said with some sadness. They sat across from each other in silence for a long while. Finally, Meg said, You've got to forgive me, Shannon. It was temporary insanity, I guess. I really do apologize. I was out of my head, really. I've been crazy for days. I mean, when I got home from Lisa's the other night, I saw shadows of flower pots on the porch. I was terrified. I was sure someone was waiting there to get me. Poor kid, Shannon said unsympathetically. When does the groveling begin? Forgive me, and I'll do anything. I mean it. I'll even ask Gary Brandt to go out with you. You'll what? You know you want to go out with him, but you're too shy to ask. Now, listen. So I'll ask him for you. Really. I'll do it to make up for this afternoon. Good Lord, I think you're serious. Shannon stared at her friend in disbelief. I really don't want you to be mad at me. Okay, I'm not mad, Shannon said. But don't you dare ask Gary Brandt anything. Okay, I... Promise? Promise, Meg said. She shifted in the seat, starting to feel a little relieved. Do you really accept my apology? Yeah, sure. I overreacted a little. I'm sorry, too. Shannon came over and gave Meg a quick hug. Now, tell me about these threats. I really don't believe it, she said, shaking her head. Meg told her about the phone call, the note, and about Tony being followed. Oh, I almost forgot. I talked to Ellen, she said, happy to change the subject. I called her. She sounded great, really good. She's really looking forward to coming back and seeing everyone. Glad to hear it, Shannon said. I have to admit I was wrong about the party. It's a good idea. You were right. Good, Meg said. I mean, great. So you'll help me with it and everything? Yeah, sure, Shannon said with a shrug. Why shouldn't we both risk our lives for the right to party? Yay. Meg laughed, but she didn't think it was too funny. Oh, before I forget, Shannon said, Mike will be home that weekend, so we'll have to invite him even though he doesn't know Ellen very well. Mike was Shannon's half-brother. When Shannon's mother died, her father remarried and a few years later had Mike. Meg had seen very little of Mike. He went away to school somewhere up in New England. That's good, Meg said. Mike's real cute. He's gotten to look so much like Evan, it's creepy, Shannon said wistfully. So who do you think wants to stop this party? She asked, sighing sadly. It was a year later, but she still wanted to avoid talking about Evan. I just can't figure it out, Meg said, shifting her legs on the uncomfortable chair. It's really making me crazy. It must be someone who really hates Ellen, Shannon said, shaking her head. But who could that be? Meg asked. Ellen was just about the most popular girl at Shadyside. Beats me, Shannon said. I just haven't got a clue. Hey, maybe it doesn't have to do with Ellen. Maybe it's someone who really hates you. She laughed. The idea really seemed to strike her funny. Meg was shocked. The idea had never occurred to her. Huh? Like who? I don't know. Forget it, Shannon said quickly. Stupid idea. Someone wants to stop this party from happening. Someone wants to keep us all from getting together again, but why? What is this person afraid of? Meg asked, thinking hard. Afraid that we'll talk about him? Afraid that some secret will come out? Afraid that Ellen will tell us something? Maybe. Shannon was tapping her fingers nervously on the antique coffee table. Now, who might have a secret they wouldn't want any of us to know about? Her face suddenly tightened. Her expression turned grim. Brian, she cried. Meg stared back at her in surprise. Brian? Meg thought of her suspect list. Brian, of course, was her number one suspect. What makes you say Brian? Well, he's so weird, Meg. I know he's your cousin and all, but he's so weird, and he's gotten so much weirder ever since that day. Didn't you ever wonder what Brian was doing in the woods? How he just happened to find Evan seconds after? She couldn't finish her thought. Shannon, you don't think Brian had anything to do with... Shannon stared into Megan's eyes. It's possible, isn't it? Yes, but... Meg knew Brian was weird, and she had always thought it a coincidence that he had come upon Ellen and Evan just after Evan had accidentally shot himself. But in a typical naive fashion, Meg had never suspected that Brian might have had something to do with Evan's death. I guess I should go confront Brian, Meg said. Try to be a little more subtle than you were with me, Shannon said pointedly. Both girls laughed. Meg was very glad she had come over. Now maybe she could go home and be able to concentrate on her psych paper. She said goodnight to Shannon, walked out the front door and down the long drive, and began jogging over the wet pavement toward home. She realized it must have rained again while she was at Shannon's, for the street was very wet and currents of water were rolling down the curbsides toward the storm drains. She looked up and saw car headlights and then a dark car behind them. It was coming toward her very fast, its tires splashing out waves of rainwater on both sides as it moved. Keeping to the curb, Meg continued to jog, but she froze in place when she realized that the car had swerved, so that it was coming right at her. It seemed to speed up. She had no time to move, no time to jump out of its path. Frozen, like a frightened deer, she tossed up her hands as if to shield herself, and screamed as the car roared down on her. Chapter 9. Later Thursday night. The driver pulled the car to the curb in front of the house and shifted into park. His heart seemed to be pounding in rhythm with the windshield wipers. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. He turned off the engine. The wipers came to an abrupt stop in the middle of the windshield, but his heart kept up the insistent rhythm. He didn't make a move to get out of the car. He didn't know if he could walk. He stared out the windshield, waiting to feel better, waiting to feel a little calmer, a little more normal. Maybe he'd never feel normal again. The rain had stopped completely. It had been a fast, hard storm and had blown over in a minute. Where was he? He looked around. It took a while to remember. He was in front of his cousin Mark's house. He was sitting in Mark's car. He had borrowed the car that morning. He was returning it when he had seen Meg jogging in the street, and then... He ran Meg down. No, he hadn't. But he nearly had. What had he been thinking of? What happened to his brain? He realized he was sweating now. The sweat was rolling down his forehead. His t-shirt was drenched. He felt hot all over, hotter than he'd ever felt. What had happened to his brain? The windshield was steaming up. Soon he'd be wrapped in this safe cocoon. No one could see him. No one could know he was in there. Maybe he'd stay in there forever. He had nearly run Meg down. He had aimed the car right at her, and then he had floored it. He heard her scream over the roar of the engine. He saw her eyes go wild. He saw her shield herself with her hands. Still, he kept the gas pedal down to the floor. Still, he didn't swerve the wheel. Then he saw her leap to the side, falling hard to the pavement. Finally, he had cut the wheel, squealed to the left. He remembered struggling to regain control, working the wheel till the car was headed back on the road. Then he sped away. He never even looked back. Maybe he would never feel normal again. He had only meant to frighten Meg. That was all. Really scare her. Show her that he meant business. That he wasn't going to kid around with any more scary phone calls or notes or lunch bags filled with fake blood. But then when he saw her in the street, he forgot what he was doing. He remembered why he had to frighten her. Oh yes. He remembered why he couldn't allow the party to take place. Yes. But he forgot what he was doing, forgot his foot so heavy on the gas, forgot his hands so rigid on the wheel. He could have killed her. He only wanted to frighten her. He had killed once. Now he had almost killed again. I'm losing it, he thought. I'm losing it bad. But he had been lucky this time. She had left away. She was safe. She was okay. But was she frightened? Maybe she was frightened enough to give up on the party. Then things could go back to normal, right? Then he could feel normal again. He'd just have the other murder to think about every day for the rest of his life. He slammed his head angrily against the side window. No, get control, man, get control. Now the left side of his head ached. Good, that felt more normal. A headache made it feel a little more normal. Take it easy, man. Deep breaths. Yeah, that's better. You only scared her after all. You have to scare her. Scare her out of having this party. You have no choice. You can't let this party take place. You can't let everyone be all together again. You can't let Ellen come back and tell. You can't let her tell what happened last year. Meg tore off the soaked, mud-stained clothes and tossed them in a heap in the middle of her bedroom floor. Then she hurried to take a hot shower. Aside from a bruise on her shoulder where she had landed on the curbside, she was fine. Now if only she could get her hands to stop shaking, her heartbeat to slow down, her legs to stop trembling. A nice, long shower would do the trick. She was so glad her parents had gone to bed early. She didn't really want to explain why she had returned home looking as though she had taken a swan dive into a mud puddle. How could she explain it? She wasn't sure she knew what had happened herself. Should she call the police? And tell them what? She hadn't really seen a car behind the headlights. She couldn't describe it at all. It had been too dark, and then suddenly it had been too bright as the headlights bore down on her. But had the car really swerved to hit her, or had the driver just lost control for a moment? The street was very slippery because of the sudden downpour just before she left Shannon's house. Maybe the driver was sliding on the street. Maybe whoever it was hadn't seen her at all. Maybe she was making a big deal over nothing. Nothing? She had almost been killed. She shivered. The hot, streaming water wasn't warming her. She dried quickly, still shivering, and pulled on her warmest flannel pajamas. Then she gathered up the clothes she had tossed onto the floor and put them down the laundry chute. What will make me feel better? Tony. Tony would know the right things to say. Tony would know how to calm her down. She missed Tony so much. She needed Tony now. She pulled a pink cotton robe over the pajamas and sat down to phone him. She looked up to see a half moon peering through her window. The sky had cleared. She punched Tony's number. It rang twice, 3 times, then a few more. Come on, Tony. Where are you? Oh? Tony? No, this is his father. She recognized Mr. Colavito's muffled stammer. It meant he had spent the evening at the corner tavern. Big surprise. He spent every evening at the corner tavern. It's me, Meg, Mr. Colavito. Meg? He sounded as if he were trying to remember if he'd ever heard that name before. Yes, Meg. Is Tony home? No, not now. He isn't? No, he went somewhere, I think. Very good. Helpful as usual. Oh, I see. Well, thanks. Sorry I woke you up. That's okay. I was only sleeping. Meg hung up. Tony's dad had been drinking even more than usual lately. Tony didn't talk about it much, but she knew it worried him. She stared at the phone. Where could Tony be so late on a school night? She sent out a mental signal. Tony, I need you. Call me. Call me, Tony. Are you getting this message? She concentrated hard, giving full force to any telepathic power she might have. Then an unhappy thought interrupted her message sending. He couldn't be out with someone else. Could he? Could he? Tony, walking quickly, did not pick up Meg's telepathic signal. He was 6 blocks from his house on the canyon road. His sneakers were soaked, as were the cuffs of his jeans. He must have walked through rain puddles without noticing them. He couldn't wait to get home and change into some dry clothes. The street was silent except for the sound of water dripping off the tall trees and the damp sound of his shoes against the pavement as he walked. Suddenly, he heard a loud, insistent thumping sound. Tony automatically felt his chest, but the sound was coming from the driveway of a house halfway down the block. White spotlights attached to the roof lit up the entire drive and side of the house. It's almost as bright as day over there, Tony marveled. He kept walking until he recognized a guy shooting baskets on a brightly lit garage backboard. It was Brian's Wizards and Dungeons buddy. Hey, Dwayne! Dwayne Cooligan didn't look up. He dribbled in for a layup, missed, took the rebound, and dribbled back down the drive. I thought I smelled you in the neighborhood, Colavito, was his cheerful greeting. Tony ran across the neighbor's lawn onto Dwayne's drive, waiting for his moment, and stole the ball from Dwayne. Hey, Tony, you'll infect my ball, man. Take a listen, Cooligan, Tony said, and made a huge high shot. Swish. It didn't even touch the rim. Lucky shot, Dwayne scoffed. What are you doing out here in the middle of the night? Tony asked, looking up at the bright spotlights. I like to shoot baskets at night, man, Dwayne said, dribbling in and making an easy layup. It's kinda soothing, you know? He caught his own rebound and quickly shot again, this time a fadeaway hook shot. Where are you coming from, Tony? Around, Tony said. Dwayne dribbled in circles around Tony. His biceps flexed when he dribbled. He had powerful arms. His body didn't look like a teenager's. He had spent thousands of hours getting it that way. So, how's it going? Tony asked, just making conversation as Dwayne missed an easy jump shot. It's going, Dwayne said with a shrug. He grabbed the rebound and dribbled away from Tony. How's it going with Shannon? Tony asked, grinning. Not great, Dwayne said, very serious. He tossed up a wild shot that bounced off the side of the garage. Truth is, she won't go out with me. That's a downer, man, Tony said, chasing the ball down the drive. I don't get it, Dwayne said, pushing both hands against the shingled wall of the house and doing some quick stretching exercises. I know her brother hated me. Evan? He hated my guts. He told me to stay away from his sister. He knew I was hot for her. He said he'd make me regret it if I ever came near her. Yeah? Tony dribbled the ball hard against the asphalt drive. He never knew any of this. Evan had never talked to Dwayne about him. You know something, man, Dwayne said, a wide smile on his face. When they found Evan shot dead in the woods, that was good news to me. I was glad. That meant I could go get his sister. Tony felt the rage start in his chest, then spread over his entire body. Evan was my best friend. He screamed so loud he hurt his throat. He pulled back the basketball in one hand and heaved it with all his might, slamming it into Dwayne's stomach. Dwayne uttered a groan of surprise. Tony started to run, slipping on the wet driveway. He was 3 houses away when Dwayne called after him. What's your problem, dork? He shouted, but he made no move to come after Tony. Tony kept running, picking up speed as he ran. You're a real dork, man, Dwayne shouted, cradling the ball against his stomach with both of his big meaty hands. What's wrong with you anyway? Tony ran for 2 blocks before stopping. Now he was drenched with sweat, but he felt much better. In fact, he felt pretty good. He didn't like people saying bad things about Evan. In fact, he wouldn't stand for it. Evan was a great guy. Dwayne was a first-class sleazoid creep. He couldn't stand there and let someone like Dwayne say he was glad that Evan was dead. He had to throw the basketball at him. He had to hurt Dwayne for saying that. He had to do something, and he did. Tony felt good about that. He felt so good, he ran the rest of the way home, 4 long blocks without slowing down once. Chapter 10. Friday night. Meg knew she was in big trouble over her psych paper now. It was already 3 days overdue. She had written only 2 paragraphs, and she wasn't sure she liked them. But what could she do? She had so much in her mind. If only she could talk to Tony, tell him what had been going on, tell him about the lunch bag filled with fake blood, tell him about the car that tried to run her down. Maybe. She had looked for him in school, but he wasn't there. She threw her pen down and crumpled up the sheet of notebook paper she had been staring at. I should be with Tony right now, she thought. It's Friday night. I shouldn't be sitting here alone writing a boring paper. What was Tony trying to prove anyway? That he was as stubborn as she was? Why hadn't he called her? She jumped up from her desk. I'm going over there, she said aloud. Right now. She told her parents she was going over to Tony's, took the car keys from her usual shelf by the door, and drove to the end of the canyon road to the small row house where Tony and his father lived. Thinking of all she had to say to Tony, imagining how they would make up, she parked against the curb and ran up the steps to Tony's front stoop. The door swung open before she could knock. Tony's father stepped out, the Cubs cap he always wore pulled down low on his forehead. He looked as surprised to see her as she was to see him. She was always surprised by how much he looked like Tony, a slighter, gray-haired version. Hi, how are you? They both said at once. I was just, going out for a walk, Mr. Colavito said. That meant he was heading to the corner tavern. Is Tony home? No. No? No, sorry. Anything I can do? You okay? Yeah, okay. Do you know where he went? Mr. Colavito started down the steps. Meg stayed at his side. Somewhere down the street, a cat was screeching its head off. It started all the dogs in the neighborhood barking, an animal symphony. He went with that boy Brian. He's your cousin, ain't he? Brian, yeah. Tony went somewhere with Brian? Since when would Tony have anything to do with Brian? Yeah, they went off to play some kind of game together. Mr. Colavito walked quickly. He was eager to get to the tavern. Wizards and Dungeons? Yeah, that's it. I think that's it. Tony said not to worry. He wouldn't be out too late. You can try calling him later. He hurried on ahead. Okay, thanks, Meg called after him. Did they say where they were going? Nope, they didn't tell me, Tony's dad called back and disappeared around the corner. Meg slowly climbed back into her car, feeling more confused than ever. Tony wasn't into Wizards and Dungeons, and he never could stand Brian. Why on earth would he suddenly go off on a Friday night with Brian to play the game? Did they go to the Fear Street Woods? That was where Brian and Dwayne always went to play it. Would he really go to those frightening woods with Brian after all that had happened there? Meg thought she might drive around for a while, but she suddenly felt very tired. She drove straight home, pulled the car up the drive, ran inside, and went up to bed. It took more than an hour to get to sleep. When she finally did manage to drift off, she had strange, colorful dreams, troubling dreams in which she was chasing people, chasing the wrong people, chasing people she didn't even know. The ringing phone on her desk woke her up. For a long moment she thought she was still dreaming, still chasing, still being chased. She picked up the receiver reluctantly. "Hello?" Sleep clogged her throat. "Hello, Meg? Are Brian and Tony there?" "No. Who is this?" "It's Tony's dad." "Oh, hi. Sorry, I was asleep. They're not there?" He sounded strange, very tense. He spoke too clearly, too distinctly, as if he'd been drinking and was trying to hide it. "No, of course not." "It's 4 in the morning, Mr. Colavito said. Brian's mother called me. Brian isn't home and neither is Tony. Do you have any idea where they might have gone to play that stupid game?" "Well, I don't know. The Fear Street Woods, maybe?" Meg forced herself to wake up. What was going on here? Why did Mr. Colavito sound so worried? "I'm calling the police," he told her. "Tony and Brian have both disappeared."